What Really Happened with your host, Mike Rivero. The history the government hopes you never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It's Thursday, January 12th, 2017. Sure happy it's Thursday. Sure happy it's Thursday. Sure happy it's Thursday. We have a lot of stuff to talk about today. There's a lot of very troubling things out there in the world we need to look at. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, twiddling the dials, keeping us out of trouble, ready to answer the phone when you call on in. We are still seeing the fallout from this huge embarrassment in which the corporate media got caught up in this story that originated with BuzzFeed, apparently began literally as fan fiction to diss Trump, and it went out of control, and everybody was forwarding it saying, oh, we got the goods on Trump, we got the goods on Trump. He had these two prostitutes in the presidential suite in Moscow, and they did horrible, horrible things to the linens. And everybody's pointing fingers at each other, and without even trying, I mean, Trump has now got CNN and BuzzFeed attacking each other in full view of the public. And the corporate media is uniting in defense of CNN. Even Fox News is out there trying to say, look, CNN they're honest and they're reliable and they're trustworthy and, you know, this was just one goof. No, it wasn't just one goof. It's part of an ongoing pattern we have seen this last year of constantly trying to shill for Hillary Clinton and damage Donald Trump, and before that, just decades and decades of lies about Saddam's weapons of mass destruction, Assad's sarin gas, the Lusitanian weapons, Pearl Harbor's a surprise, torpedoes in the Gulf of Tonkin, USS Liberty was purely an accident, and so forth and so on. How many times do you have to be lied to before you're willing to stand up and say, you guys are lying to us, and we are not going to listen to you any longer, because that time is at hand. Now, Kellyanne Conway was talking with CNN's Anderson Cooper over the fake news report, and basically Kellyanne said from where the Trump campaign, Trump presidency sits, there's not a lot of difference between CNN and BuzzFeed. They just grabbed anything that sounded salacious and ran with it. Now, Stephen Molyneux is basically out there saying, if your own journalists cannot confirm any of this information, why are you publishing it? On what basis is the American public supposed to verify the information? Isn't that really what the journalists are supposed to do, is verify the stuff before it goes to press or gets broadcast? I mean, BuzzFeed is out there trying to say, well, we didn't know if it was true or not. We just thought the American people should decide. Now, over in Russia, there is a gentleman who was named along with his company in this documented alleged connections between Donald Trump campaign and Russian hackers. And he says no U.S. intelligence officers have ever contacted him about the accusation. Nobody came by and said, did you really do this? And he says, by the way, it's all fake. It's all false. And apparently, even James Clapper is now calling it quits on this one, and basically saying this whole BuzzFeed CNN report is, in fact, complete bovine excrement. And he's absolutely right about that. We all know it. And all the corporate media have got egg all over their faces. And as I said before, if Fox News is, destroying their own credibility, Shepard Smith is defending CNN. So Fox isn't quite the unbiased source we were kind of hoping it would remain. It wasn't as compromised as the other corporate media outlets, but it's still compromised. And ever since Murdoch took more direct control, Fox News is just as bad as the rest of them. Now, there's an important question that everyone has to deal with. We all know what money laundering is. When you need to hide the fact that the money in your possession comes by way of nefarious sources, you transfer it through legitimate sources, and it appears clean on the other end. We all understand that. Well, the same thing is done to propaganda. Somebody will come up with some propaganda, and knowing that if they present it, it'll be viewed with suspicion, so they run it through something that seems like a legitimate source, like the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, or various other made-for-the-purpose front groups. And in this case, Senator John McCain became the propaganda laundry, because this story passed through his hands on its way to the intelligence agencies, who then apparently incorporated it into their assessments. They were made fools of, too, by this whole thing. And McCain is trying to duck the blame for having been caught up in this thing, saying that he was just doing what any normal American citizen would do, passing on indications of wrongdoing. Well, Mr. McCain, I have personal experience with that 22 years, going on 23 years ago, trying to point out where the White House Deputy Counsel was murdered. Didn't go all that smoothly. Now, story out of RINF.com, all of this Russia hacking evidence is a fake. And basically, there are groups that are out there to create propaganda and make it look like there's some kind of an independent investigation. CrowdStrike appears to be one of them. CrowdStrike, which was the DNC contractor, and one of their corporate officials is a member of the Atlantic Council, whose agenda is confrontation with Russia. And the fact is that the claims made by CrowdStrike aren't even backed up by CrowdStrike's own facts. It's just made to purpose. We're going to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just rejoining our network. Now, remember when they claimed that Trump was given a written report on these Russian rumors that they had compromising information on him? It turns out that actually never happened. So now we're getting fake news about fake news, about fake news, about fake news. If at first you don't succeed, lie, lie again. Motto of the U.S. government and the corporate media. What's going on here, though, is pretty much obvious to everybody. The deep state has declared war on President-elect Trump, and they're out there trying to discredit him and delegitimizing, using all these unverified claims, rumors, innuendos. The Democrats and the liberals are cheering, yes, go get him. We don't care if you're lying and cheating and bearing false witness. We're allowed to do that. We're liberals. We're members of the Church of Liberalology. The rules don't apply to us. But we're literally seeing just how afraid the entire entrenched oligarchical establishment is of Donald Trump and the American people who support him. Now we're finding out at one point the FBI actually went to the FISA court, the Foreign Intelligence Service Act court, asking for a warrant to spy on Trump campaign officials. And ironically enough, it was one of the very rare cases where the FISA court said, no, we don't think this is a good thing. So this is really we the people and Donald Trump against that entrenched establishment. Now, as you know, the individual who was used as a propaganda laundry, the anonymous source behind this dirty dossier, has been outed as an ex-MI6 spy, which there's no such thing. Once MI6, always MI6. But his name is Christopher Steele, and he works now for a private intelligence organization. And now he has gone into hiding. He told his neighbor, look out for my cat. He fears for his life. And he's gone into hiding. Now, I wonder who he's afraid of. It may be simply that he is the chain of accountability. They go past, they talk to him and find out who put him up to this, and that's a big problem. He's a live liability. Now, as you know, we reported in recent weeks the historical reality that it is the United States, specifically the CIA, that is in the business of hacking and interfering in foreign elections, tinkering with their politics all the time. It's a little hypocritical for the United States to be screaming about Russia interfering with our politics with that track record, and also the double standard, where it's okay for Israel to interfere in our elections and our political process and decide who will and will not be a member of Congress. It's okay for Israel to do it, but if Russia is even thinking about it, that's a cause for war. But in a very real way, you could make the argument that the U.S. government is the father of foreign election hacking and cyber war. Now, as you know, Obama just had his farewell address from Chicago, breaking with tradition. Up until recently, presidents have made their farewell address from the Oval Office, and for some reason, Obama went up to Chicago because it's where he got his start. And looking at Chicago today, I don't know that that was a particularly wise move for him to do. But we're seeing all these articles coming on out, basically saying that his speech was a load of bovine excrement. He talked about himself incessantly, pushed the liberal agenda, and really didn't say a whole heck of a lot of anything else. All right, we're going to go ahead and grab some phone calls here. Kyle in Pennsylvania, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. I don't know if you have any familiarity with the whole Gamergate fiasco from a couple years back, but anybody who followed that has already seen the way this whole media, whatever you want to call it, works out. In the gaming media, about 2-3 years ago, they started doing the same thing, lying, insulting their audience, villainizing them, and when the audience finally realized these people are liars and these people are full of bovine excrement, that was the end of it. Once the people stood up and said, okay, we are all together against you and we know that you're lying to us, the amount of truth calls that happened in that area of journalism has been massive. Ethics reform, you name it, the entire industry has changed. So anybody who followed that will see how this will play out, because this is exactly the same exact thing that happened then.
Yeah, it is. This is the collapse of the corporate media, and again, for another parallel, look at what happened to the Soviet Union in the months before it collapsed, where the Soviet citizens just all realized the sheer scale of the lying that was going on in the establishment media, Pravda and Izvestia, and the government itself, and they simply stopped listening to the government and listening to the media, and the government simply was unable to function past that point, and they collapsed. And I think the same thing's going to happen here, and I'm sorry to see it happen. I thought that with Trump in the White House, there might be a chance to salvage what's left of this nation, but obviously we're seeing the entrenched political establishment still insisting on following each other off that cliff like lemmings.
Well, and it's very clear, you'll be able to see very clearly who is and who isn't who has any sort of ethics in media. The people who say BuzzFeed, what they did was okay, CNN, what they did was all right, it's common practice in journalism, and then the other people, the other journalists and media personalities who say, no, completely wrong, completely slanderous and libel. You're going to be able to see very clearly who is and who isn't a member of, who wants to follow the rule of law. And that's going to be, I think that's where the true divide's going to be. And all
it's going to be very few. You're going to be able to count them all on the fingers of just one hand, and very clearly the orders from on high are clamping down on the corporate media to just stay in absolute lockstep, pushing the agenda, damage Trump, bash Russia, raise the fear, Russia's coming if we don't attack first, and they're really doing a full court press on that one. And we're going to be talking about that a little bit later in the show.
I don't think you can overestimate the importance of what happened yesterday with Trump looking at CNN, once the most powerful news organization in the world, looking at them on a global stage and saying, you are fake news. I don't think that can be underestimated how important that was.
Oh, it's very, very important. And by the way, in the other corporate media outlets and CNN, when they're replaying that tape, they've actually cut out the audio where Jim Acosta just kept trying to say, I demand a question, I demand a question, I demand a question, and just to focus on making Trump look like he was out of line calling CNN the fake news. But, of course, he wasn't out of line. And you're absolutely right. This is having global impact. Every one of the stories covering this, every one of the YouTube videos that is talking about it, you read those comments and you can see the people of the United States of America are on Donald Trump's side on this, because the people of the United States of America, 94% of the people of the United States of America know the corporate media is just constantly full of lies.
That is the moment when the little boy points at the king and says, he ain't wearing no clothes. There's your moment right there.
Yes.
Trump's calling out CNN saying, you are fake news. I mean, that can't be taken back. That is going to be utterly devastating to the mainstream media.
Well, we're all following along. We've been saying all along, the corporate media is the fake news. When Washington Post put that term out there, they were trying to apply it to the independent media. It backflashed on them to the point where now the Washington Post is saying, we shouldn't use that term anymore. Really, that didn't work out very well for us. You know, they're in panic mode. They're in thrash mode. They don't know what to do because they are trapped by their business model. They can't start reporting the honest truth because that's not what they're paid to do.
Yeah, I can't believe the stupidity of them to put that narrative out there. I mean, they had to have known that, I mean, once they named themselves. They titled themselves. They were the ones, I mean, once they put the focus on it, it was so easy to just put it right back on them and point out. You know, the old saying, you point a finger at someone, there's three pointing back at you. The moment they did that, they should have known that they were stealing their fate.
No, they didn't. I'll tell you why. Because the upper management and the corporate media are still a bunch of Cold War fossils or, 60s fossils, and they still live in a world where the headline gets the attention and steers the public opinion, and the eventual retraction and apology, which is buried behind the obituaries, basically gets ignored. But in the age of the independent media, that doesn't work any longer. Where the U.S. government and the corporate media have come up short all along for the last couple of decades, they continue to underestimate the impact of the independent media and the dramatic change it has brought about in the skepticism of the American people and the fundamental flow of information. Because, and again, the polls are showing trust in the government and the corporate media is in the single digits. That's a government hovering on the edge of paralysis.
I think you're absolutely right. I think the changeover where the public now prefers a longer form, explain it to me, from beginning to end, radio shows, 20-minute, 30-minute long YouTube videos. That's where the public is going, getting away from these bombastic headlines of, boom, 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 1, 2, 3, Trump is this, and then nothing on. I think, you look at some of the views that people are having online, you look at the people who are listening to radio stations, they're going towards that long form so they can have a more complete understanding.
Well, basically what they're saying, they're saying, okay, that's your headline, show me the proof now. And the corporate media keeps coming up short because they're putting out all this ridiculous stuff for which there is no proof. And again, they have got a history of lies, fraud, and deception they're going to have to try and live down. They're fighting their own past. And again, they did it to themselves. I have no sympathy for them whatsoever. And we're seeing it in the numbers. The readership, viewership numbers for corporate media are in massive decline. They're all losing ad revenues. They're losing subscriptions. The paywall online versions of the corporate media aren't making any money because people say, I'm not going to pay to be lied to. Now we've got the New York Times is literally emptying 8 floors of its own building to convert to rental offices just to stay in business. We're seeing newspapers all over the country. They're starting to let their film reviewers and art critics and all those extra added feature people go. And all they're keeping are the ones who will read the computer screen for today's propaganda and parrot it out to the world.
The Wall Street Journal had a 94.7% drop in profit last year. 13% is considered catastrophic. 94% is, shut the place down. I mean, they didn't lose a lot, but, they went from making, I think, $10 million down to profiting only $400,000. And the dramatic amount of that money is going from advertisers and not so much from subscribers because the subscribers dropped off years ago. So
back in 2008, they had a huge cutback on subscriptions. Anyway, listen, Kyle, got to let you go. Got to take a break for commercials. Got 2 more calls waiting when we come on back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're going to go back to the telephones here. Bob in Las Vegas. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Bob,
hi, Mike. How you doing?
I'm doing good.
First I wanted to say a thank you, a big obrigado to Mike in Brazil for his thorough review of the Rusev case.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you again for that. Mike, I just got back from in Panama and Costa Rica, and we become a laughing stock. here. But I tell you, I've got a few friends down there. They're expats, and they are now huge fans of yours. They had not heard of you, and now you're getting big in Panama, Costa Rica. So
well, aloha, Panama and Costa Rica, and yeah, it's kind of interesting to see. And it's not just me. I mean, all of the independent media are now reaching a global audience.
Yeah. And I also, recommended you to my uncle in New Jersey. He told me an interesting story that he had a dinner with Giuliani. He was seated at the same table with Giuliani. A lawyer friend of my uncle's invited him. And he had told me the story about Hillary. I don't know if this is out in public or not. Hillary and the Secret Service, where she was meeting this woman for a little tryst in this hotel, and the Secret Service agent pleaded with her that he needed to know where she was going to be, who she was going to be with, and she did not want to tell him. And he kept insisting, it's his job. She said, fine. She finally relented and said, fine, I'll tell you, but you're going to be in Alaska tomorrow. And he was in Alaska the next day.
Okay.
So, that's the kind of woman she is.
Yeah, well, we've had a lot of exposés written by people who served in the Bill Clinton administration, and even back then, she was completely out of control. And I know a lot of people are very concerned about Donald Trump right now. They're not happy with a lot of his policies and appointees, and neither am I, but I still maintain Donald Trump at his absolute worst is still a heck of a lot better for the country than Hillary Clinton at her best.
Yeah, I agree. And, while I was away, Mike, I didn't miss a show, thanks to YouTube. But I just watched Trump's full press conference this morning, and that part with CNN was fantastic when he called them out, called them fake news. But I didn't like what he said. He was kind of cavalier with respect to Russia, saying that if we have good relations, that's great. If not, we don't. And I don't know. And according to the Paul Craig Roberts wrote a few columns saying, has Trump been has he been pressured? Is he changing his attitude toward Russia? Even during the press conference, he said Russia was behind the hacking. So, and then today it sounded as if we had Ashton Carter being confirmed, going through this confirmation process instead of Mattis. So Mattis was speaking like, it seems like nothing's changing. We got Ashton Carter back in the Pentagon if he's confirmed. Tillerson said some negative things about Russia. So I don't know if they're just saying this to get confirmed, to get on the good side of these warmongering senators, or they actually believe this.
I think the former. I think that Trump's selection of appointees was limited by people he thought he could get confirmed, because I'm sure there's a lot of people he wanted that he knew Congress would reject, and that would be a blot on his administration before it even got out of the starting gate. And yes, I'm pretty sure that all of those people going through their confirmation hearings are going to be telling Congress what they think Congress wants to hear. And so I wouldn't put all that much stock in any of that, politics being what it is these days.
And then finally, you say a lot about what went on in Europe during World War I and World War II, and the signs of those wars are still visible in certain places. But I don't see enough opposition in Europe. I think there were a few hundred people protesting in Germany. I mean, they've got to get out there in the streets and let their voice be heard. These politicians aren't going to be swayed by a few hundred people in the street. They're going to need to see hundreds of thousands of people in the street, millions, for them to change their stance towards Russia.
Okay, Bob, let me ask you a quick question because we're almost at the commercial break. If there were 1 million people in the streets of Europe saying no to war with Russia, do you think you would see it on CNN, MSNBC, Fox, ABC, NBC, CBS, PBS?
No, you wouldn't, but those local politicians would see it.
No, the point I'm saying is there are probably a lot more anti-war demonstrations going on that you're simply not aware of.
Oh, I see what you mean. Okay, well, fair enough. Right. I just want those politicians in Berlin and in Paris and the other countries in Europe to see that presence. So they change. That's the most important thing. So they change their views.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, because this idea of Russia is the aggressor is complete nonsense. Everybody knows it, and we got to stop nodding and going along out of a sense of politeness or patriotism. All right, Bob, got to let you go. Got to take another break for commercials. Back with another phone call after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're going to go back to the phones one more time. Steve in Texas, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha. Hey, You there?
Yes, I'm on. You're on the air.
Okay. All right. Wow. Obama surprises Biden with medal, freedom medal. Very interesting. It seems like a lot of people are getting participation awards, like in grade school, all of a sudden.
Oh, yeah, well, the end of an administration is when they hand out all the goodies and everything. I mean, Obama, I think it was 2 weeks ago, literally ordered the Defense Department to award him their Distinguished Public Service Award.
That's what I was getting to. I was going to talk about that. But another thing is, even in the Golden Globes, that was another participation award that Meryl Streep got, because she hasn't done any good movies in a while, as far as I remember. Yes, she is a good actress. I do agree with that, but I haven't seen her anything really good. And, all of a sudden she gets that, and she gets a chance to be able to say what she wants to say.
Well, the Golden Globes are run by an organization called the Hollywood Foreign Correspondents Society or Association or something like that. A grand total of about maybe 60 people. And they have these awards and they hand out the Globes, and they're promoted as a really big deal, like they represent some kind of opinion of the movie-going public. And Hollywood's obsession with awards is based both in ego and in box office, because people will say, oh, they won this gold thing, I'm going to go see the movie. And very often the awards are actually politicized with an eye toward who can financially exploit that award most. And the example I would like to choose goes back to the movie Stargate, which I worked on, and we got nominated for an Academy Award, but the production company was on the verge of going out of business, and if we'd won the award, it wouldn't have amounted to anything, wouldn't have improved the economy of the town as a whole. So the Academy for Motion Picture Arts and Sciences Blue Ribbon Committee basically threw out our nomination, and the movie Speed won the Oscar that year, even though most of its effects were mechanical on the stage effects rather than computer animation. And I've seen that happen so many times, but it was thought that the studio that produced Speed would be able to financially exploit the Academy Award much more than the company that I'd been working for. And that's what, it's all politics and economics that go behind these things. I'm sure I'm not the only person who's noticed. Another good example.
It goes a lot deeper than this.
Well,
this is another thing, another angle. If you notice, there's a ceremonial award.
Hang on. I got one more thing I want to throw in there, and then I'll let you talk about your deeper level here. Avatar is my all-time favorite movie. Period. End of discussion. And it should have won awards at the Academy, but it didn't, because it's very obviously an anti-imperialist, anti-war statement, and that year all the awards went to The Hurt Locker, which was pro-war and pro-military and all, and it gets really obvious sometimes that these awards are not handed out on the basis of the merit of the film itself. Anyway, Steve, go ahead and say what you were going to say.
Okay, well, what I was going on about was, it seems like there's an award ceremony for every little thing these days. Like a 5-year-old graduates from kindergarten, he goes in the first grade, and all of a sudden they have their little cap and gowns out and stuff, and then a 5th grader goes up to 6th grade, they have the cap and gown, and so forth and so on. And it used to be just like, hey, you went from grade to grade, okay, from up until 12th grade, you get that big ceremony. You graduated, man. You did the big thing. Mm-hmm. Nowadays, it's like a little ceremony for every little thing.
Well, it's good for business for the cap and gown rental companies.
Real accomplishments.
Well, it's a good business for the cap and gown rental companies. But you're right. When they start giving out awards for every little thing, it loses all meaning.
Makes no sense to me.
We've really abandoned the principle of a meritocracy in favor of, as you said, participation awards. And we've reached a point here where right now all you need to do is be able to walk upright and breathe at the same time, and sooner or later you're going to get some kind of a trophy for something. And
yay.
Yeah, and it has become rather meaningless, and You know, I've picked up my share of awards for this and that over the years, and, you know, they're all packed away. I got sick and tired of dusting them.
Yeah, it makes them, like, the more you get, the less it means. Anything.
Yeah, that very much is the case.
Oh, well. We'll let you go, man. All right, good day, bro.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go here. Now then, a little bit of good news. Hillary is back under the spotlight. Now, as you know, the FBI last Friday released another batch of 300 emails that make it very, very obvious something underhanded was going on. It included confirmation of the State Department literally offering a quid pro quo, which is Washington, D.C. speak for bribe, to the FBI to change the description of Hillary's emails from classified to unclassified in exchange for State Department permission for FBI agents to be deployed to places around the world where previously they were not allowed to go. So now they could set up an FBI field office in Monaco, in the Bahamas, anywhere they felt like having a permanent tropical vacation at taxpayer expense. We knew that before. This documents it again. And it does indicate very strongly that Hillary Clinton's lax security practices allowed state secrets to fall into the hands of foreign governments, some of which are not our friends. Now, the big case, or the big question is, was it just accident and negligence, or was it deliberate? Pardon me for the constant pauses. I'm a little under the weather today. So I want to go back and resurrect that article that I wrote earlier this year, asking if Hillary Clinton, while Secretary of State, was engaged in espionage for profit. Now, the precedent for this occurred during Bill Clinton's administration when he was running for re-election. And using his authority as president, he authorized the sale to China of very sensitive technology they had previously been forbidden from acquiring over the express objections of the Pentagon and the intelligence community. And at the same time, Chinese money was pouring into Bill Clinton's re-election campaign coffers. It was being funneled through Chinese-American citizens to make it nominally legal, but investigators had found the money was actually originating with very rich Chinese individuals, and in one case, Chinese intelligence itself. And there was an investigation that was underway. It was called Chinagate, and it never went anywhere because, oh, golly gee whiz, the email server at the White House broke down, and we turned off the backups a month ago, and so all the requested subpoenaed documents are just unavailable. Part of a repeating pattern. So, present day, Hillary, as Secretary of State, is parking highly classified documents, including special compartmented access documents, on her private email server. Those were not accidentally sent over the Internet, because the networks that carry that special access compartmentalized data are air-gapped from the regular Internet. The only way data gets from those private networks to the general Internet, to Hillary's server, somebody puts it on a flash drive and walks it out of the Tempest Vault and over to where they want to take it. So she has all of these secrets on her server. The Romanian hacker Guccifer, who broke into her server, said that while he was there, he saw IPs from at least 10 other countries prowling through the files. So here's the question. We have a weak private email server, weaker security than Ashley Madison, on which are parked all the nation's secrets. And the Clintons have this foundation, which is legally allowed to accept money from foreign governments, and huge sums of money into the Clinton Foundation came from foreign governments. It's a perfect setup for espionage. Hillary doesn't have to actually steal and make copies of the files, like Pollard did. Doesn't have to leave marks on mailboxes like Aldrich Ames did. Doesn't have to wrap it up in plastic and tape it underneath a bridge in a park like Robert Hansen. It's a perfect system. It runs itself. It's a legitimate question to ask if Hillary Clinton was repeating the Clintons' 1996 Chinagate scandal, because they got away with it then, selling U.S. state secrets to foreign governments in exchange for donations to the so-called charitable foundation? That's a legitimate question. Now, everybody is already starting to ramp up for the incoming Trump administration. Jason Chaffetz is preparing for the renewed, enhanced Clinton investigations by passing a new whistleblower protection law. Obviously, it's going to sit in Congress until Trump is in the White House and can sign it. But it's new protections for FBI whistleblowers who are going to come forward and say there's something that was going on. And the reason he put this bill together is because of the question of improper pressure brought to bear on the FBI by the Department of Justice. So this is going to get very, very interesting very quickly. Unless Obama, in the 11th hour, writes a blanket pardon. And he may be forced to do that and just live with that on his legacy. Newt Gingrich is out on Twitter saying, "I'm struck by how brain-dead the left is becoming. No ideas, no solutions, nothing positive to offer, and I'm in agreement. Just whining and crying and so forth and so on. Bunch of screaming, tantrum-throwing children." Now, getting on back to the confirmation hearings, and I want to preface this by saying, we need to be very careful about overreacting to what these nominees are saying before Congress, because they want to be confirmed. And in order to get confirmed, they have to tell Congress what Congress wants to hear. So I wouldn't read all that much into what they're saying. Tillerson was out there saying China should be denied access to the South China Sea Islands. There are, of course, a lot of reasons why that is nonsense, but we have a Congress which, despite a lot of anti-incumbent sentiment this last election, is still dominated by people who think war with Russia and China is a really good idea, that they're going to make a lot of money off of it, that it's going to distract the American people from all the crimes and corruption and election fraud that's been going on. That last part, not going to work here. But Russia has reacted to some of the comments Tillerson made about Russia. They thought he was a friend of theirs, and for a while it did appear. And Russians online, ordinary Russians, not the government, this is not official, Russian citizens online are demanding Tillerson return the Order of Friendship he was awarded by Vladimir Putin in 2013. And again, the caution that Tillerson and all of these other nominees may just be saying what they think Congress wants to hear in order to be confirmed. And I wouldn't read all that much in there. General Matisse is out there screaming Russia is the principal threat to U.S. security. He's absolutely flat out wrong. Our own internal corruption and rot is the principal threat to U.S. security. But again, Matisse is probably just saying what he thinks the war hawks in Congress want to hear at this point. Now, Pompeo was being given a hearing for CIA confirmation. The lights went out halfway through. I'm sure it's just a coincidence. All that infrastructure is crumbling all over the country and everything. Now, when Jeff Sessions was up for his confirmation hearing, he had his granddaughter in his lap, and in the latest example of liberal hysteria, MTV writer Ira Madison III attacked Jeff Sessions for holding his own granddaughter in his lap. Madison described the child as a prop and said Sessions must have stolen the baby from a toy store. And she actually put out a tweet saying, "Sessions, sir, kindly return this Asian baby to the Toys R Us you stole her from." She since deleted that tweet, apparently not realizing that really is Sessions' granddaughter there. All right, we're going to take some phone calls. Dustin in New Jersey, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Mike. Yeah, this is the way that these people are. You know, to make comments like that's what they're really thinking.
Yes.
They don't care about you. They don't care about me, Mike. These tweets that they send out, this is what they believe.
Well, you know, there's unfortunately a huge amount of groupthink pressure, and that is something that Donald Trump is definitely not going to go along with. But there have actually been psychological experiments, including the one by Stanley, the guy with the shock machine. I'm blanking on his last name. where, if you have large groups of people and you show them a picture of something and all of the people in the room are already been told you will describe it the wrong way, that that test subject, the one who's not in on it, will just go along with the crowd. There is unfortunately a dramatic amount of herd instinct in people, and it's not just the ordinary citizens, it's also the people sitting in Congress. If they think everybody else around them wants war with Russia, they're going to sit there and say, all right, okay, yeah, war with Russia, rah, 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 rah. I don't have to fight in it. My kids don't have to fight in it. Mike in the control room just said it was the Sidney Milgram experiment. But I'm talking about others, where they'll have 20 people in a room, and they're being asked to describe a picture, and 19 of the people in the room are in on the gag, and they'll misdescribe it, and the test subject will just go along. That is, unfortunately, a very tragic aspect of the human mind and the human condition, and it does affect Congress as well. They're all sitting around there thinking everybody else around them wants the war. It's really only just a few loudmouths. But that's how it gets sold.
Like John McCain. Like
John McCain and Lindsey Graham and the rest of it. John McCain, I swear, if war with Russia actually breaks out, John McCain is going to die from the orgasm he's going to have.
But Mike, do you realize what this phony, fake report has shown is who's the problem? It shows Trump who is the enemy now. You know what I mean?
Yeah, oh yeah.
So do you think this report, I'm thinking alternately, was given knowing they're going to release this, knowing certain elements, because there's still elements in the CIA, NSA that are still the good guys, you know what I mean? But let them release this knowing it's fake, and it shows who is the enemy, and also makes people in power look stupid. Can you hold me over?
Yeah, I'm going to hold you over. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're talking with Dustin in New Jersey. And I think a good example of the groupthink is this Pissgate scandal, because all of these corporate media outlets had this dossier for a very long time, and they were all looking at it and saying, it just doesn't feel right. Then BuzzFeed runs with it, and they say, okay, we're going to go. And they all just leapt on board, much to their humiliation and embarrassment. So, yeah, they're not being careful. They're out there serving an agenda, and that's what they're focused on, rather than getting their facts straight.
But the thing is, with John McCain, he is the enemy, because he is trying to ruin Donald Trump before he gets in. So he's on the Intelligence Committee, I believe, right?
I'm sorry.
So,
which one?
John McCain, I believe he's on the Intelligence Committee.
Yes.
So he is the leak.
Well, yeah, he got the document from somebody associated with we had the actual timeline out there, but basically it was John McCain who handed this dossier to the intelligence services and said this is real, and it got incorporated into their assessments of Donald Trump and Russia, and it's absolute complete junk and nonsense.
But people need to realize, Mike, it's not Republican and Democrat. This is about, he's a globalist. That's what this is about. Globalism, Mike.
This is about the Brzezinski agenda, which was then updated with the Project for the New American Century, where there has been this long dream of conquering Russia and China and making the world America. Not that we're so much of an ideal to be holding up to anybody else, but that's it. They're pushing for war with Russia as hard as they can. We're going to be getting into that in a little bit in the show.
Mike, and I wanted to switch to Russia real quick about the report the other day about the S-400s being brought into Moscow suburbs.
Yes.
Now, they were brought in November.
They're bringing in more.
Yeah, so somebody tipped them off, though, in November because they brought also in the Panzers, that's short and medium range anti-aircraft.
I don't think somebody had to tip them off. I don't think somebody had to tip them off. It's very obvious to anybody who's watching the rhetoric coming out of Washington, D.C. and the corporate media that the U.S. is gunning for Russia. that once Donald Trump won the election, that obviously the window of opportunity to get that war was closing and had to occur somewhere between Election Day and Inauguration Day. And we're coming down to the wire on Inauguration Day, and I'm not at all surprised that they've got defensive military systems set up around Moscow.
And remember, in order to rule the world, if you want to try to beat Russia and China, you wind up ruining the world. That's what it's going to come down to, because the world will be rubble.
Yes.
John McCain's 80 years old. What is he going to get out of it?
Oh, like I said, he's going to get a thrill. Oh, I got the war going. I got the war going. All right, we got to take a break for station identification. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, and we're going to go ahead and grab another phone call from Clint in Las Vegas. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. Well, one thing with Justin, John McCain is a Rothschild agent. Back in 2008, when his campaign was bankrupt, he went to England to the Rothschild Castle and came back with $100 million, and he laughed about it. And so, just like Hillary, he's a Rothschild agent. But I wanted to go on. I want to talk about Trump's security, and I keep playing back the Kennedy thing in my mind, how they constructed this plot, this conspiracy, right under the nose of the Attorney General. And it's not enough to put a security bubble around Trump. He has to do more than that. He has to turn the surveillance state against the very top suspects. And by that I mean Hillary, the Rockefellers, the Rothschilds, where they can't pick their nose without, they're onto something. They're doing something. Something's going on here. I just want to get here. I'm sure Trump's thought about this. He did not get where he's at by being stupid. But he's got to assume that something's in the works.
Well, I'm sure that he realizes that he's in a great deal of danger. That's why he's keeping his private security. And the good news is the private security and the Secret Service Protective Detail are reportedly working together very well. But ultimately, Trump knows he's taking a risk. And that was apparently a risk he was willing to take. There were some times during the campaign where we could see he was wearing body armor underneath his suit coat. So he's well aware of the danger. Anybody who stands up to that establishment, to speak truth to power, to strike a blow for liberty, do so at risk of life, limb, fortune, and family even. And look at all those people who were dying mysteriously in the final weeks of the election. Seth Rich, John Nash, all these live liabilities. I'm not surprised this MI6 agent's gone into hiding because he is now seen as a possible threat to a lot of people.
Or the head of the Clinton Foundation. He's apparently gone into hiding, or his body's going to turn up somewhere. One more thing. Remember that video that came out about this black lady who's apparently squatting at Trump Tower, and Trump let her stay there, and she's been there like 8 years? Was that authentic, or did that turn out to be a hoax?
I actually didn't spend much time looking into it. It sounded like a feel-good story. I understand that he did let her stay there. And for how long, I don't know.
Okay. Well, I'll let you go from there, Mike. Have a good day.
All right. Thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch over to Errol in the Netherlands. Errol, aloha. What's on your mind today?
Hello, Mike.
Hello.
First of all, I want to... hello?
Yes.
Yes. Hello, Mike. First of all, I want to wish you a very happy New Year, and for Claire also. And I want to say about Donald Trump, and we have forgot about the Yemenis people from Yemen. What have they done to the Yemenis people? Nobody is talking about that in the mainstream media, the so-called mainstream media. We call it the fake media nowadays, but we are going to watch it because the Arabs, not the we must not put it on one straight line. We must see there are some forces, the Yemenis people are so subject of annihilation. You know, annihilation? They are being destroyed. And nothing in the Dutch media, in the American media, in the Russian media, I don't hear nothing about it.
Well, we're covering it. We're covering it.
Yemenis people are the subject of elimination. So I just want to make this clear. Just like the Palestinians, the Yemenis people are now suffering. And that is just what I want to make clear. Because I don't see that in the mainstream media or in the independent media. Nothing at all. So I just want to make clear, the Yemenis people are suffering. And we need to put an eye on that situation, what they are doing with them.
We have
because
okay.
when we are not looking at them, then we are going to go straight back to exactly the same thing that we are talking about.
Okay,
Thank
now,
you, Mike.
all right, hang on a second. We're going to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. We do talk about Yemen. It's not a top priority with everything else that's going on, but we do talk about Yemen all the time in the context of this ongoing pattern of covert and sometimes overt U.S. overthrows of legitimately elected democratic governments and the imposition of puppet rule, which now the whole world realizes the U.S. has been playing this game over and over again since the end of World War II. Iran in 1953, Chile in 1973, Ukraine hasn't worked out too well, and they did it in Yemen, and they did it in Libya, and the people of Yemen and Libya are saying, we do not want to live under foreign puppet rule, and they're fighting back. And so the U.S. is basically going on in and pounding all these people to teach them the lesson that once you are conquered by the American empire, you will stay conquered. And they're not actually winning the hearts and minds of the people this way.
So what I want to say to you, let Donald Trump talk about the Yemeni people.
He already has.
The Yemeni people.
He already has.
Yes.
He's already come on out. He's already said, well, under his administration, this foreign intervention policy is going to end.
Mike, listen, I just want to say, let Donald Trump talk about the Yemeni people just like the Palestinian people. And then we can make a deal with the Israeli people. Because there are some Israeli peoples that are in conflict with the Yemeni and the Palestinians. So we're going to see what has become of that moment in time. Because we are now in a moment of time that is so perfect. We are now on the 13th of January. We're going to see something on the 20th of January. It's okay or it's not okay. We're going to see something or we're going to see nothing.
Well, it's going to be a very long time from now to the inauguration. We're seeing all this posturing, this attempt to sell a war, and there could still be some kind of a desperate effort to get Donald Trump removed and let Mike Pence take the Oval Office. We're hearing from all the liberal buttercups and the snowflakes that they're actually convinced they're going to start nationwide riots that will force Congress to remove Donald Trump. Personally, I don't think it's going to happen because of the track record of failure ever since the election itself, plus the fact that we're dealing with an exceptionally hard winter that for most of the country, people are just going to want to stay inside and stay warm. We could actually see this inauguration underneath a blizzard, and that would really make it impossible for all of these Black Lives Matters and feminists and everything to show up there and cry at Donald Trump's inauguration because they'd have icicles hanging off their face.
I will say one thing to you. Yes? Okay. This is the last thing that I'm going to say to you for this year.
Okay.
Because I see what you have. Follow me on, Scene Live. Follow me on Gap. Follow me on VK, you know?
Yes.
Follow me on Yandex. Listen. The establishment is done. It's done. And when they're going to go further, they have got a very big problem. And the very big problem is not only with the people from America or from Russia or from Europe. You know where the problem is? From the people from all the world. From all the world.
Oh yeah. Oh,
I
absolutely.
just want to say this. Yeah, exactly.
It's a pushback.
Listen, Mike. You have put this on your website. I like that so much. I just want to say to you, go on with that. We are the new generation, and they can't stop us. When they want to stop us, they can't. Because, you know why they can't? Because we have got so many alternatives. We've got so many programs. We are programmers. I myself are a programmer. I program computer programs. We can do so much things. They have no idea what we can do in the future. They are thinking, okay, this is it. Okay, this is No. We have already owned them. We own them. Mike, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you as well.
Later.
All right, we're going to let you go here, and before we take the next call, I want to respond to some of that. I don't like framing what's going on right now in terms of we own them, because what's really going on, it is a case of a corrupted globalist oligarchy self-destructing. And partly it's because they overused the policies of lies and deception and got caught. Partly it's because of this habitual problem of going with an idea that sounds good at the first pitch session, but they don't think it all the way through. Flooding Europe with the refugees, for example. And so I think what we're seeing is a globalist empire that wasn't quite established, already collapsing from its own internal rot and corruption. And everybody who was part of that empire is going to go down with it. That's a separate issue from what's going on in the media, because what we're seeing is an evolution of the flow of information in the population. It is as dramatic as when the movable type printing was invented, books became inexpensive, literacy exploded, and all of a sudden the ruling class were not the only ones with books, and they weren't able to just sit there and say, this is what the book says, you will believe me, because people could now get their own books and check for themselves. And those institutions that could evolve to the new reality of a better educated middle class are still with us. And those entities and institutions that could not adapt went extinct, and we're going through the same thing again, because the internet and the independent media have fundamentally changed the way information flows through society. And what we're seeing right now is a government and a corporate media unable to evolve to adapt to that new reality, and it's time to declare them an endangered species and put them in a little protected reserve out there somewhere in the Arizona desert with a fence around them and water and everything to protect those last few surviving samples of the almost extinct species here. All right, we're going to take another phone call. Mark in North Carolina, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, Mike, this guy, John, what was his name, John, that guy from Germany there? He's absolutely right. I was thinking if Trump goes with the neocon line, I'm going to drop him. He's going to lose my support like a stone, and I'm not the only one, trust me. I think, what we need, Mike? We need the draft. We need a draft again, because only with a draft, now you got 18-year-olds can vote, plus you got their parents, their relatives and grandparents and cousins and uncles and aunts, whatever else, okay? That would stop this. now these politicians, most of them never even served a day in the military, or if they did, like a madman like McCain lost his mind.
He actually betrayed his country. McCain betrayed it. He committed treason. He actually made propaganda videos for the North Vietnamese.
I've been trying to find that. I can't find it yet. I've been trying to find that.
Search it on YouTube.
Actually did that.
Somebody made a YouTube video about it. They've got the actual radio broadcast and the whole history of that.
Okay, but I'm saying, you know, I think if you had a draft, this nonsense would stop. Then you would see people really take to the streets. As far as you see both the neo-libs and the neocons be put in their place. I really can't stand those people, Mike. I hate people because they will get people killed and they don't care because they themselves, nobody's shooting at them. They'll make sure their kids don't go to the military.
We're just gaming chips. We're just gaming chips in the great game. We've got millions of chips to spend on this whole thing. The legislation for a new draft has actually been sitting in Congress. And for a while they were going to draft young ladies into combat roles. Now that part has thankfully been rescinded. But what they're waiting for is some kind of an event that will persuade the American people war is necessary. Then they'll push the draft through and there won't be any opposition to it. The problem with that is, that in order to stage a false flag or whatever, and I'm still very concerned about those Junker T-72 tanks that Ukraine has, you have to have a public that's predisposed to believe the propaganda, and our government doesn't have that anymore.
But I'm really getting concerned when I see, like, this guy, let's say Mad Dog Mattis and even Tillerson, all, switching now, saying, oh, Russia's the most dangerous threat and blah, blah, blah. Even Iran, they're talking about Iran, what a threat Iran is. Yeah, but again, you have to take that with a grain of salt. These guys want to be confirmed into their positions in the Trump administration. They're telling Congress what they think Congress wants to hear. They're pandering to the John McCains and Lindsey Grahams out there. And I wouldn't actually wager any money that what they're saying is really what they think and feel and believe. And in any event, regardless of what they themselves think, they're answerable to President Trump. President Trump sets the policy and the agenda, and anybody who challenges that is going to get pink slipped. Yeah, but he started switching around. He said again he thinks there's a good chance he won't get along with Putin and this and that. And who do you think he'd rather face, him or Mr. Slick Willie there? And
I think. Hang on a second. Hang on, Mark. One comment, then I'm going to let you go. I think you are still buying into too much of the third-party reporting about Donald Trump, where it's reported he says this, it's reported he says that, and then 2 days later it comes on out and said, no, that wasn't said at all, or it was quoted out of context or selectively edited. And at this point, again, let's give the man his 100 days in office and see what's really going to be going on. My top concern right now is this very obvious attempt to start a real war with Russia before Trump can even get into office. And I think we need to be focused on that. So thank you very much. We're going to let you go here. Get on back to the news here. Interesting little story just broke in Sputnik News. This individual, this ex-MI6 spy, Christopher Steele, who was the source of this unsubstantiated claim that Donald Trump and two prostitutes defaced the bed where the Obamas had slept in the presidential suite at the hotel in Moscow. He's also the same guy who was the FBI's sole source linking the FIFA corruption scandal to Russian gangsters. And it was on the basis of that information that the FIFA presidency was changed, and the new FIFA president said that Russia could no longer host the 2018 World Cup, tried to take it away from him. So this guy's got a long history of manufacturing anti-Russia propaganda. Lying for the U.S. government is big business, business is good. We're going to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Interesting news. Marine Le Pen, who is now leading the polls for France's presidential elections, was spotted in New York at the Trump Tower. The conclusion, obviously, is that she's there to meet with President Donald Trump to talk about aligning France and the United States outside of the sphere of the globalists. Now, Donald Trump is already making decisions about the decor in the Oval Office, and one of the things he's done that has been very thrilling to people in Great Britain is he's ordered that the bust of Winston Churchill that was there for several presidential administrations, and it was removed a while ago, and I forget which president removed it, but he's said that that has to come back. The bust of Winston Churchill will be restored. So that's a good thing here. Now then, as you probably already noticed, Congress, in anticipation of the Trump presidency, is already preparing to do the repeal of Obamacare. And basically, the Senate has taken the first step by passing a budget resolution passed along party lines. And basically, the next step is instructing 2 House and 2 Senate committees to come up with plans to roll back that health law, basically wipe it on out. Now, obviously, in there needs to be a provision for people who lost their own health insurance. Remember when Obama said, if you like your plan, you can keep your plan? Turned out to be one of the biggest lies come out of his mouth. And people lost their previous insurance. It even happened to me. I mean, I had to go on to an Obamacare-compliant plan. Well, if Obamacare gets rolled back, this opens up the possibility that some health insurance companies are going to say, we don't want you back as a customer, you're too sick, you're too ill, you're too old. And some provision has to be made for them. At this point, if anybody from Donald Trump's administration is listening to my show, and I figure it's an even money bet, I think this cannot be an administration of half measures and compromises. What is needed are dramatic, draconian solutions. Maybe we need a national health care system like they have in Canada or France. But one thing that we definitely need to do is pull back from this paradigm of constantly treating chronic symptoms at tremendous cost to one of actually trying to avoid illness and disease in the first place. And I'll give you a good example of why that's so important. Autism was unheard of before the 1940s. It's not an historic disease like plague or measles or any of those others. It was first noticed and described in the mid-1940s. Just a few years after, vaccine companies started using the mercury-based preservative thimerosal as a vaccine preservative. And autism diagnoses have been climbing exponentially ever since. Today, the stark reality is it's an epidemic, an unacknowledged epidemic. 1 out of every 45 American children are going to be diagnosed autistic, always after they get this huge number of mandated vaccines. And by the way, if you have not seen the documentary Vaxxed, you need to. It's on pay-per-view on Amazon Prime, and you can get the DVD from Amazon, or even you can order it on eBay now. It's available there as well. At the current rate of growth, by the year 2030, half of all children will be diagnosed as autistic. The problem shows no sign of slowing whatsoever. That means the children born in 2030, half of them will be unavailable to the workforce. And a significant portion of the available workforce will be used up caring for these autistic children. And that means we're simply not going to have enough workers in other sectors of our economy, like manufacturing, construction, agriculture, and so forth, to run the nation. At some point, there will be so many autistic people, there won't be enough workers left to run the country. We're looking at a systemic collapse. We'll be right back. And And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Now, as I mentioned earlier in the program, the crybaby, whiny, liberal, buttercup, snowflakes, whatever they're calling themselves, have whipped themselves up into a frenzy for the inauguration on the 20th, vowing to make it the most chaotic inauguration day in American history. And their stated goal is to disrupt the inauguration festivities as much as possible. And they're talking about civil resistance, civil disobedience. Others are talking about blockades, jumping the barricades, throwing projectiles, and city-wide paralysis. They're not going to be happy until they start a civil war. Now, there's an article that came out over in RINF.com talking about this overwhelming opposition to Donald Trump from taking office by the entrenched oligarchical establishment, who are now basically broadcasting their existence to ordinary Americans who up until now was oblivious. They were oblivious to what was going on. And apparently the establishment is still holding out a hope that by some means, fair or foul, they can still stick Hillary Clinton in there, or at least hand the White House to Mike Pence, who's a little bit more tameable and controllable in their view. And they were trying with this riots after the election, threats against the electors, an attempt to block Congress accepting the electoral votes results. Now all this nonsense about Trump is a Russian stooge. He's going to be influencing the United States on behalf of Russia, and that can't be allowed because that's Israel's gig to run our country. But everything they do is broadcasting their existence to ordinary Americans who up until now really weren't paying attention. And as we keep saying here on this show, the fastest way to bring down a dictatorship is to force them to act like one where everybody can see it. They're talking about using the 25th Amendment as soon as he is in office to remove him because he's obviously a puppet for Russia. Really? Can we go back and talk about how Hillary Clinton sold 25% of America's uranium reserves to a Russian company? Can we go back and look at that? Talking about Russian puppets. Now, with the GOP Congress, I don't think you're going to see a lot of people deserting him and supporting the impeachment, let alone removal from office. Impeachment exists for high crimes and misdemeanors, and Trump has not committed a crime. Now, out in the gambling centers of the world right now, the bookies are saying it's an even bet that Donald Trump will not complete his first term in office, that either he will resign or be impeached or assassinated. I'd like to disagree with them. But that last one is a very real possibility. I don't think he's going to resign. He's not a quitter. And I don't think he's going to be impeached. But definitely taking him out through wet work is a reality. Now, there's another point of view over here at naturalnews.com saying basically the radical left, in just 10 days, 9 days actually, 8 days actually, will attempt to overthrow the U.S. government, and they are going to fail. And apparently, these liberals are delusional. They really think there's a chance that if they start a ruckus, that the entire nation will rise behind them. And by the way, have you seen all these corporate media polls saying how, Trump's approval numbers are down at 30%? He hasn't even done anything, and already they're saying, oh, the American people can't stand him. But apparently, according to somebody who actually infiltrated one of these liberal groups, the plan is supposed to start as protests that will then trigger rioting, followed by occupying of federal buildings, followed by a declaration that someone else is the legitimate president of the United States. Like I said, they're not going to be happy until they start a civil war. Now, I don't think it's going to happen, because we've been hearing all these dire warnings about how the liberals were going to do this and the liberals were going to do that, and right after the election, they were rioting and causing property damage, ironically enough, in the cities where Hillary had won, which didn't make any sense at all. And so they didn't get any traction. But I'm not the only one saying we're faced with a civil war because Hillary's backers will not accept that they lost the election. They don't feel they should play by the rules. The rules are fine when they work for the candidate. Remember during the primaries, when Bernie Sanders kept getting the majority of the popular vote, and somehow or other Hillary wound up with the delegates. Didn't say anything about the fairness of the delegate versus popular vote system back then. It was only when it worked against her it became an issue. So there's a lot of very angry people out there, but I don't think there are as many as they think. We've had a month to calm down. I think the vast majority of people who are out there screaming about Hillary and Trump and everything, I think they've calmed down, especially the ones who weren't being paid to be there, and we know that some of them were. Like I said, the factor that they're not including in their calculations is that we are entering a very hard winter, snow all over the country. We could easily see the inauguration take place in the middle of a blizzard, and that is just going to shut down any ideas about disruption and paralyzing the city. All right, let's talk about the war zones. A lot of stuff going on out there. The Syrian army is increasing their activity near Al-Bab, and apparently they carried out airstrikes against terrorists south of the strategic ISIS-held town of Al-Bab, which is under siege by Turkish forces. Apparently those U.S. Stinger missiles have not gotten to them or are probably not working. These things do have a shelf life, by the way. The Syrian government forces are gaining the momentum against militants in Wadi Barada area northwest of Damascus. Now, 4 more settlements in Syria's Damascus province have joined the ceasefire plan. They're all on board with bringing this war to an end. What do we see here from the United States? They're still spinning and lying again, trying to sabotage the ceasefire. Trump's pick for head of the CIA, Pompeo, was out there saying Russia's doing nothing to aid in the defeat of ISIS, which is a flat-out lie. But again, he may be pandering to what he thinks Congress wants to hear in order to be confirmed. All right, we're going to go ahead and grab a phone call. Brandon from San Francisco, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Mike, just calling in to let you know that Calexit has formerly been suspended due to California sliding off into the Pacific.
Okay.
Getting a lot of rain out here.
Yeah, somebody sent me some pictures.
I wanted to comment. Go ahead.
I was going to say, somebody sent me some pictures of the snow up in Oregon. It is just intense. It's in our readers' letters section. Please continue.
So, caught the show yesterday. It was tanks, and mentioned, I'm sure you remember, they also purchased some aircraft and got caught painting them in the Russian colors. I don't know if you
I don't recall that was Ukraine who did that, but the U.S. was caught painting, I think, some F-16s in Russian colors. They claimed it was for training purposes only, though. Correct.
Now, I really think you hit on something with this. It really is like a smoking gun. And frustratingly enough, I don't think anyone else is covering this. InfoWars, for example, they're going into some areas that, kind of dancing in circles, but this really does seem to be a smoking gun. And if we can get out in front of it with these other independent media, it really would put a damper on their false flag.
Well, that's why we put it up on the website. I keep bumping it to the top. I've posted it to all my social media. And as I indicated yesterday, the Rivero's Rangers have an assignment to grab that story and its commentary and post it to their social media. When I posted it to my social media, I said, please make this go viral in order to get it on out there. Because the only possible reason for Ukraine to buy these junk T-72 tanks which are not really usable for any kind of combat, and Ukraine doesn't use the T-72 anyway, is to basically paint them in Russian colors and use them to stage a false flag, a repeat of the Gleiwitz incident.
Yes. I actually went online after you mentioned that, and I looked around, and there is a little bit of a buzz surrounding those tanks. Once again, I do think this is kind of the smoking gun. So, just real quick, I hate to say this, but I feel as though these Obama psychopaths are going through the motions, giving appearances they're preparing for transition out of the White House, but it's all smoke and mirrors. I mean, we're going to know in a few days whether or not, but it just seems like they would not stack the deck with all these troops and make these moves just to hand it over to Trump. I mean, this just seems like we're DEFCON, 4.
You got it running backwards. DEFCON 4 is things are almost calm, and it goes back down to DEFCON 1, which is war is underway. If they're really going to do something, it's going to have to happen this weekend, because it's going to take at least a week for the NATO forces to get far enough into Russia to force a response by Putin, and then the war will be on in a way where Trump is going to have a very, very hard time shutting it all back down. If it doesn't happen by the inauguration, then we've bluffed them back down by pointing out the obvious false flags, and we can maybe breathe a sigh of relief that we're stepping back from the potential of a nuclear war.
I think it would make sense for Trump to call these just moves out on Twitter and say, listen, this doesn't make any sense what you folks are up to, in fact, it may be unprecedented. I'm sure you might know better than I, but to put this guy, push him to the cliff, and then say, okay, here are the keys. It just doesn't compute. And as much as I hate these folks, they do have some bit of logic and pushing him into a corner. I mean, there's got to be, I don't know, I don't think they're going to go away smoothly. I don't think they're going to leave office cleanly.
I think you're absolutely right. They're considering what they can do. The question that's going to restrain them is, can they succeed? Nobody wants to start something this dramatic and fail, because then you're looking at treason charges and death penalty. But again, as I keep telling everybody over and over again, our most powerful weapon against false flag starts for war is doubt. If we can make the perpetrators doubt that their official story will be believed, they'll call it off. And that was one of the reasons why I got that T-72 article out there again, why we talk about possible cyber attack blamed on Russia, why we keep reminding the world over and over again of all the times wars have been started with lies, fraud, and deception, in order that the planners of these things are going to be looking around with their finger hovering over that go button and saying, I'm not sure we can pull this off. I'm not sure the American people are going to believe the official story. And they'll back off.
Last thing, Mike, you mentioned that you had some type of contact from the Trump administration. I don't know if you covered that or not today, but hopefully someone's listening and we can get a tweet out or someone, we see what's coming, and just call him, because people respond. When he tweets, it does not go unnoticed, and I think he's his best advocate to foil these fools. On that note, I'm going to let you go, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot here. Yeah, absolutely. Donald Trump knows that the corporate media is still adversarial, and he wants to carry his message directly to the American people through Twitter, through other social media, through the independent media. And frankly, at this point, I would ignore anything the corporate media says about Donald Trump from this point forward, especially after the Pissgate scandal, because they're just making this stuff out of thin air to try and damage him. At this point, why waste your time on Fox or CNN or any of these? If I could call my cable company and say, get him off of there, I definitely would. But they're required that you get the propaganda channels along with your home shopping network and the rest of it. But again, Trump is going around them, and he is very clearly an anti-establishment candidate. But this issue of war, that we have to keep a close watch on, and we have to keep sharing with everybody that the U.S. government has lied to start wars before. They've staged incidents. They've set people up to be killed in order to rile the people up in support of war, and there's every indication they're getting ready to do that again. And the only thing that will stop them is if the planners look out of their windows in Washington, D.C. and say, you know, the American people aren't going to buy this one. Doubt is our most potent weapon against these false flag planners. Now then, getting on back to Syria, the U.S. Department of Defense announced it's still killing people over there in Syria. And they're admit funding and arming the terrorists. Because, hey, that's our job. We need to get Assad out of there. He won't do what we tell him to do. Now, to nobody's surprise, Russia is seeing this massing of arms, weapons, soldiers all along the border in Poland as a threat. Of course they're going to see that. If we saw thousands of Russian tanks, personnel, aircraft, missiles on the Canadian side of our northern border, we'd be pretty nervous, wouldn't we? It stands to reason. But Russia is not the aggressor here because we don't have thousands of Russian tanks and aircraft and missiles and troops on the Canadian side of our northern border or the Mexican side of our southern border. We don't have Russian battle groups sailing around the Gulf of Mexico. Now, to no surprise, Russia has deployed an S-400 missile regiment around Moscow. It is now effectively on combat duty, high alert, and I imagine it will stay that way until January 21st. We're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And we just now reposted that YouTube video of John McCain's making recordings for North Vietnam, for which he should have been charged with treason, but was saved by Richard Nixon's blanket pardon on all returning POWs. And you need to understand the McCains are hereditary servants of Israel, because it was John McCain's father, Admiral John McCain, that was in charge of the cover-up of Israel's attack on the USS Liberty. So it's a family thing. It's a family affair, so forth and so on. I've also had a couple of people who wrote on in to remind me that, in point of fact, it was Barack Obama who took down the bust of Winston Churchill and replaced it with one of Martin Luther King. It's a big building. Can't they have both? Anyway. So, as I mentioned before, this is an important story, and this is probably the most important story for you to share with everybody this coming week, this coming weekend. Back in 2014, Ukraine bought a bunch of old junk T-72 tanks from Hungary. They paid $8,500 a piece for them, which is their value as scrap metal. Most of them cannot even move under their own power. They're useless for combat. Ukraine does not use the T-72. So even the parts are worthless to Ukraine. But Russia still uses the T-72. And when Ukraine bought these tanks from Hungary, they were shipped around Europe through a very circuitous route and then into Ukraine, trying to hide the fact of where they were going, but they got caught. So you have all these T-72s, which Ukraine doesn't use, can't use. They're junk. They can't be used to fight. The only possible reason for Ukraine to get those was to paint them in Russian colors in order to manufacture a phony Russian invasion of their border. And those tanks are still there. They could still do it. And as far as aircraft, it's very easy to change the markings on an aircraft. Just a couple of cans of paint, some work, and you're there. When Israel first attacked the USS Liberty, the planes that were flying, had no markings at all. It wasn't until the Israeli torpedo boats came on out with Israeli markings that the Liberty understood who really was attacking them. And the only reason those torpedo boats came on out was because the air attack failed to sink the ship. So this is very important because right there is the means to stage a new Gleiwitz incident, to basically drag these tanks out somewhere on the Ukrainian side of the border or the Polish side of the border with Russia, bomb the heck out of them, and then take pictures and plaster them all over the media saying, see, we stopped a Russian invasion. The war is on. Huzzah, huzzah, huzzah. Got to take a break. We'll be right back after station identification. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And boy, oh boy, this story about this former MI6, when I'm saying former, once MI6, always MI6, Christopher Steele. He is this British spy now working for, well, he actually owns a private intelligence outfit, is the author of this report that claims Donald Trump hired 2 prostitutes to deface the bed in the presidential suite of the Moscow Hotel. Absolutely no substantiation whatsoever. Christopher Steele, as we reported earlier in the show, was also the guy who wrote the report claiming that the FIFA corruption scandal was linked to Russian gangsters, which Russia has denied, but it resulted in the incoming FIFA president penalizing Russia for something which apparently it turned out they didn't really do. Now it's come on out. This Christopher Steele was hired by Planned Parenthood to try and put a positive spin on all these videos showing the sale of baby parts. This is who this guy is. He's a liar for hire. Lying for the government is big business, and business is good. Lying for corporations is big business. They don't call it lying, they call it public relations. But that's really what it is. Now, Guantanamo's torture centers are now 15 years old, rather. And perhaps in commemoration, as it were, there was an article that came out over in Russia Today talking about all the things being done to those prisoners. Sleep deprivation, scaring with dogs, force feeding, waterboarding. We know from Binyam Mohammed that very tender portions of their bodies were being sliced with razors to get them to admit where Saddam was hiding his weapons of mass destruction. Don't say they don't exist. We know they're out there. Our president wouldn't lie to us. There are a lot of people who are now urging Barack Obama to close Guantanamo before he leaves office in order to deny its use to Donald Trump. I hate to admit it, I would actually be on board with that. It's time for Guantanamo's torture. It's time for all of these torture centers to close. Torture does not work. This is another area where I disagree with Donald Trump. Torture does not get you actionable intelligence. It gets you politically expedient confessions. That's why the Inquisition did it to the witches. That's why the Nazis did it to their prisoners. That's why the North Vietnamese did it to John McCain. That's how it all works there. Now, over in Egypt, they're continuing their program of freezing assets of more non-governmental organizations. They're being criticized by the United Nations. How dare you get in the way of the NGOs? But the Egyptian courts are basically investigating these non-governmental organizations that are receiving illegal foreign funding, and that is a legitimate area of concern. Are these NGOs really about charitable work, or are they, in fact, front groups for hostile intelligence operations? We know USAID was caught doing that sort of thing. That's why Putin kicked them out of Russia. Hungary is cracking down on all non-governmental organizations run by George Soros, but those organizations are vowing to stay in Hungary despite the crackdown. I don't know what they're going to do. They're not going to have any money. Hungary will cut off the flow of cash. But they're going to do, remain defiant until they get hauled away and thrown in prison? Because George will sit there and let that happen. in order to complain, oh, the abuses of our people, but he's not going to spend a day in prison over this whole situation. It's just not his nature. Now, following on the videotape of an Israeli diplomat talking about working to remove members of parliament and members of the British government who were not sufficiently obeisant to Israel, has come a new revelation. Apparently, the Union of Jewish Students, which is a group that is on all the major college campuses in Great Britain, is being funded by the Israeli embassy in London. Now, these are the people who go on out and they constantly launch attacks against anybody advocating for Palestinian rights. They got lots and lots of money with which to work. And they're always out there screaming, oh, it's hate speech. When you talk about the Palestinians, it's hate speech. You're Hitler lovers, you're Jew haters, you're this and you're that. They're being funded by Israel. And I think we need an investigation in this country how many of these pro-Israel groups on our college campuses that are trying to bring about the end of the First Amendment by screaming hate speech, I wonder how many of them are receiving funding from a foreign source. Now, the situation in Israel and Palestine is about to get a little bit more nervous. As you know, this Sunday, the 15th, is this big meeting in Paris where all these nations are going to get together and discuss the reality of a Palestinian state and a two-state solution. Obviously, Israel's opposed to that. Congress, the United States Congress, the finest Congress Israeli money can buy, passed a non-binding resolution demanding that the U.S. prevent the Paris meeting from actually doing anything of any substance. We're going to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. There's a new complication. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov is going to be holding talks with representatives of the leading Palestinian organizations on January 16th in Moscow, one day after this meeting in Paris. So Palestine may turn into the new Cuba if we're not careful here. Now, we've been talking about U.S. military hardware, and in particular the F-35, and we ridiculed the Pentagon earlier in this year when it came on out and announced by imperial edict that the F-35 was now ready for deployment, despite all the problems they're having with it. And the U.S. Marine Corps has just deployed 10 F-35 fighters to Japan. This is the first permanent overseas deployment of the Joint Strike Fighter. There's only one problem. It is still not ready for combat. And apparently the key software for the F-35 is still being delayed, still buggy. The Autonomic Logistics Information System is the heart of this software support for the F-35. Its latest version has been delayed by at least 6 months. The software for the Cannon won't be delivered until 2019. Those whiz-bang helmets, $400,000 apiece, still can't be made to work. But if the government says it's ready for combat, it's ready for combat. All right, we're going to grab a phone call. Francis in North Carolina. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello. Hello. Aloha to you.
Oh, aloha back.
I tell you what. I know my upcoming comment is going to ruffle some feathers, so just to pre-note you ahead of time about that.
Okay.
In light of the comment about Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, Camp Gitmo, whatever you want to call it, so forth, ad nauseum, whether it's being shut down or not, or who's doing it, or whatever have you. You know something? Regardless of who happens to be sitting on that throne in the White House, i.e. the feather ruffling.
Yes.
The military-industrial complex is not going to let go of a moneymaker, which is exactly what that place is for them. And they're never going to shut that thing down. If they can explain it off as some low cap for something, special operations or whatever, they're going to do it.
Well, I think right now the military-industrial complex is dealing with a major PR disaster because the American public is now aware that some $6.5 trillion with a T has vanished into the Pentagon, and nobody seems to have any idea where it went. And so the American people are absolutely not going to be on board with giving the Pentagon any more money until they have a better idea of where it's being spent and what is being done with it.
Well, I hate to say this, but I have to disagree with that comment because, one, not every single person is aware of that. I can tell you that my one relative, who's a sister-in-law, who happens to be very, for that matter, she had no clue about that whatsoever. Even if you brought the information to her face, she'd be in denial of it. And
well,
so
the people in denial are a single-digit minority in the American public right now.
I'll give you that. I mean, of course, and again, I'm not going out and doing a poll for that matter to see what people do or do not know. But there might be a minority of people that are very trendy and listen to mainstream, whatever have you, ad nauseum. But when it comes down to numbers and all that, and who's pulling in what amount, places like that are not going to shut down. Maybe it might take an extension, or who knows? Or maybe it might be I don't think even a special commission or whatever you want to call it, that the commander-in-chief would set up to have that investigated and thus shut down, unless they actually themselves went there and say, all right, no, this does not need to be, shut it down now, or you're fired.
Well, you know, Harry Truman did it. In the years leading up to World War II, Harry Truman went on out. He toured the entire country. He went to all the defense contractors, and he yanked contracts.
Yeah.
Okay.
That was, and yes, but I'm talking about currently. This is now 2017. You're talking about another administration and so forth, and I'm not going to get into the dirty details about all that. So that's just aside the issue, but unless the current commander-in-chief actually goes there in person with his entourage or whoever, security team, and actually went down and said, no, this all gets shut down now, otherwise you're fired. Unless they actually do that in person, it's never going to close. It's a moneymaker.
Actually, it's a money loser. It's a money loser because, listen to me. The people inside the military-industrial complex are getting very, very rich, and they're absorbing a huge amount of the gross domestic product, with which they produce very little that can be used to actually improve our economy, other than by direct conquest of other people's wealth. The fact is, most of that money is effectively being poured down holes, like missile silos and onto warships, and the same mentality back during the original Cold War. We're going to spend all this money, and we don't care if the stuff works or not, because the theory is it's never actually going to be used. It's just a giant hole that we're throwing the American people's money into and laughing our way to the bank. And we're already seeing, Donald Trump yanked on Boeing's leash over the new Air Force One. He's yanked on Lockheed Martin over the skyrocketing cost of the F-35. And we're already seeing Boeing come on back and say, well, maybe we could cut a few billion off the deal. And Lockheed is saying, well, we could tighten up a few things here. Because, everybody understands it's out-of-control spending here. And Trump is a businessman. His first instinct is going to be to lower the cost to do what he needs to do in order to free up more revenue to accomplish other things in areas that have been neglected. And so I think that's why the military-industrial complex is afraid of Donald Trump. Again, I hate to agree with the bookies, but there's a very real chance he's not going to survive his first term in office.
Well, there's one thing, an actual thought for you, Michael, is this. Common sense, when it comes to things like this, gets thrown out the window. But then again, when you're dealing with politicians in D.C., there's no such thing as common sense. And that's all there is to it.
Well, there is when the voters start saying we're only going to vote for candidates with common sense. And when Harry Truman was doing what he did, the American people responded. That's why he ultimately wound up as vice president and then inherited the presidency and then beat Dewey, despite the corporate media of his day trying to sabotage him.
Well, true. Now, also, mind you, that was a different point in time considering how high-tech this day and time is compared to then. It's enough to blow your mind. You have to literally get a section of duct tape to wrap your head to comprehend what in the world is actually going on.
Well, it's deliberately obfuscated. I mean, they don't want people to know where the money is going. I mean, and we're not even talking the Black Project here. And again, if you've never seen it, there's a very funny movie called The Pentagon Wars. It's based on the book by the same title about the development of the Bradley infantry fighting vehicle. It was directed by Richard Benjamin. He did a fabulous job. And it is still out there in like Netflix or Hulu, and you can hunt it down and you can watch it. It is a fun movie. And everything that's in that movie, it really did happen, including the thing with the sheep.
Wow. What was the name of that again?
Pentagon Wars.
You know, with a name like that, it's almost in your face.
Yes.
That's sad.
And you're gonna love the opening titles too. Okay, thanks an awful lot. We're gonna let you go. No, if you go back and you look at history, there have been some horrendous military boondoggles. Things that you'd say, why did they even try and make this? You just had to know it was not going to work the way they thought it was going to work. But it's all about money and so forth and so on. Speaking of which, our government is probably one of the most creative and ridiculous governments when it comes to new ways to waste your money. And back in this last year, we were talking the other day about some ridiculous research projects which appear to be funded as a payback for political favors. But apparently the National Eye Institute and National Science Foundation spent $300,000 to conclude that girls will play with Barbie dolls more often than boys. Apparently this came as a shock to the liberals who honestly believe that there is no difference between men and women other than what society imposes on them. And that goes all the way back to that Margaret Mead nonsense. This study by the National Science Foundation also found that girls could better identify the faces of Barbie from a lineup of assorted dolls. You know, there's all these different Malibu Barbie and Paris Barbie and Oprah Barbie and divorcee Barbie who comes with all of Ken's stuff. And, I mean, that was the whole point of this thing. $300,000 to find out whether boys or girls spend more time playing with Barbie dolls. I could have answered that question for a mere $100,000. I guess that's why I'm not in government. The National Science Foundation and UC San Diego apparently spent $1.5 million to put a mud skipper fish literally on an underwater treadmill to test its flopping speed and need for oxygen. $1.5 million. The National Science Foundation and Department of Defense Office of Naval Research spent $460,000 so that computers could binge watch 600 hours of TV shows and 400 hours of online videos, all to see if an algorithm would emerge to predict when characters would hug, kiss, shake hands, or exchange a high five. Primetime soap opera Desperate Housewives and the sitcom The Office were among the big targets of this artificial intelligence study. The rationale was the Navy said we need to develop computers that will anticipate what their human operators are going to do. Only if your ships are being crewed by the Real Housewives of San Diego, I guess. The FAA has dumped $200 million into building and upgrading the Mid-America St. Louis Airport in Mascota, Illinois, which has only one airline operating out of it. Just one. I got to look at that airport through Google Earth. It's amazing here. All right, a little bit of economic news. The United States lost 286,000 manufacturing jobs under Obama. They gained 3,238,000 jobs in retail and food service, which are all minimum wage. Apparently up in Chicago, Mayor Rahm Emanuel is very unhappy that Moody's gave the city a junk bond rating and is trying to sort of muscle Moody's into rescinding that. You know, you give us a better rating or maybe something bad going to happen to you. You know, this is Chicago. We've got Chicago ways of doing these things. Apparently, Bitcoin just suffered a major collapse, and the Chinese investors who got in late got fleeced. Seems like somebody did a virtual pump and dump on that one. We'll be right back after these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Now, we keep hearing from the government, from Barack Obama, from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, from the New York Fed, the economy is in good shape. Look at the stock market. The economy is just absolutely doing fine. We've never had so many food service workers in the nation's history. We don't understand why you think the economy's in trouble. Just because we don't manufacture anything anymore. Nobody wants to buy our GMO agriculture. But if the economy's really in good shape, why are Walmart and Boeing laying off workers? Why are so many retailers closing stores? JCPenney just jumped on that list. They're going to be closing more of their stores. And here is where it really comes down to, should we trust the government and the corporate media? We already know they are lying big time. 7.2 Pinocchios on the unemployment numbers. By the simple device of not counting people who have been unable to find work for weeks or months or years, they don't count them. The unemployment numbers are based only on the people who just lost their job in the last couple of weeks. So they come up with a number like 5%. Meanwhile, there are over 95 million American citizens willing and able to work right now who have not been able to find jobs for weeks or months or years. That's the reality. So obviously that 5% number is a lie. And as it turns out, there's another one out there that is a bald-faced lie, and that is the claim that inflation is only running at 1.7%. We know that home prices are up. They're at 2006 highs. Rent has been climbing between 3 and 6% for the last few years. Taxes, tolls, and government fees are going up anywhere between 5 and 10% per year. Healthcare costs are going up between 10 and 50% per year. Then when you look at the commodity prices, the things that we use on our daily life, oil, gas, electricity, corn, soy, whatever, they're going up 5 to 7% just in the last month. So how are they coming up with 1.7% inflation? Now, they openly admit that when they're calculating the rate of inflation, they leave off food and fuel costs, which is where inflation tends to show up first and hardest anyway. But when you look at costs going up, your bank account being on empty, do you believe the government when it says inflation is only 1.7%? I certainly don't. And it's not just the rise in prices. We are seeing the Federal Reserve literally creating billions and trillions of dollars out of thin air to pour all over Wall Street to keep that looking like that's still intact. That has to contribute to inflation. I guess over there at the White House they're saying, we're not going to count that. We don't count that. We don't count this over here. Those people will believe anything that we say. They're such fools and morons out there. Now, apparently, the Internal Revenue Service has announced they're going to be delaying refund checks for quite a while, actually, even for all the early filers, primarily the poor households. And apparently, the issue from the IRS, what they're claiming is it's to fight fraud. Really? How does the fraud become less of a problem 2 to 3 months from now than it is right now? I think the Treasury just simply doesn't have the money to be paying refunds. And at the very least, they're going to have all of that money to roll around and play with, and you won't. So something funny is going on over there at the Internal Revenue Service. Now, getting on out to the globalists, they're not having a good time. Human Rights Watch has now denounced Trump and European populists as being a threat to human rights. Now, that's getting pretty Orwellian because it is our right to choose our own leaders. It is our right to place our nation's interests over that of the neighboring nations. Those are our human rights, and we are exercising them. But Human Rights Watch is basically saying that the only human rights to be concerned about are the globalist ones. All right, we got to take a break for commercials. We'll be back. We got a caller waiting on the line. We'll be back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We got some breaking news here. Al-Masdar News is reporting that mere minutes ago, the Israeli Air Force bombed a Syrian Arab Army ammunition depot inside the Meza Air Base in rural Damascus. In other words, Israel just carried out an airstrike against the Syrian army, against the Syrian government. And maybe that's how they're going to start the war with Russia. Because Russia may chase them out of there, and the U.S. will say, well, we have to come to the defense of Israel and Russia are now hostile, and blah, 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 blah. Any excuse to send your children off to be killed and crippled for more money. But this is clearly an attempt to provoke the situation there. All right, we're going to take a phone call. Mateus in Canada, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
On that topic, if Israel were to ever nuke somebody, that would fulfill this prophecy that one day all the nations of the world would be marching on Israel.
Well, I don't know who's going to march on Israel once they finally actually acknowledge that they have nuclear weapons. Of course, it's probably the world's most poorly kept secret at this point.
No, I mean, if they flipped out and went and nuked Iran or something, the whole world would then come to put down Israel. And that would fulfill the prophecy that one day all the nations will be descending and marching down on Israel. Anyway, it's not, that's not really the point of why I was calling. Well, this sounds so boring now. I wanted to talk about deodorants and colloidal silver.
Okay.
Okay, so the best deodorant is a crystal block. There's a brand name just called Crystal.
Yes.
And I wanted to explain the difference between deodorant, antiperspirant, and antibacterial. So a deodorant is just perfume. An antiperspirant is a bad idea that closes the pores so you cannot sweat properly.
That jams up your lymphatic system.
Yeah, that's a bad idea. And then what this is it's an antibacterial. So it leaves the pores open so you can breathe properly and your lymphatic system is working properly. It just creates an environment that is not conducive for bacteria to prosper. So it's just a very salty environment that the bacteria doesn't like.
Yeah, I've seen those. I've seen those rock crystals before here, and the problem is there are chemicals in whether they're called deodorants or antiperspirants. There are some very toxic chemicals in there, and especially women. When you realize the close proximity between your armpit and your breast tissue, you have to wonder if some of this breast cancer is caused by these toxic chemicals, and unfortunately, we live in a society where corporations are allowed to sell us dangerous, risky products as long as it makes money and they're paying taxes to the government and the government gets their piece of the action. These things seem to be okay until the public kicks up a stink, and then they'll go, oh, all right, we'll stop selling that. God, you people are so picky.
Yeah, so we have to take care of ourselves from the grassroots level up.
Yes.
And just find these products that are good for us. And I'm a man that works hard, and I never have BO ever. Like, this is so effective, it's incredible, and it's healthy. I bet you it's even a little bit good for you, just some natural mineral salt. So regarding colloidal silver, I'm an inventor, and I built a machine, and I just wanted to share some tips of how to make better quality colloidal silver.
Okay, well, it's going to have to be quick because we're running out of time, and I still got a bunch of stuff I got to get to.
Okay. If you purchase your silver as a form of bullion, you cannot use it because it has a coating on it. But if you wire brush that off with a wire wheel brush or a bench grinder with a wheel, then you have 10 times less impurities in your silver because it's quadruple 9 pure bullion. which is instead of the 999 tier that everyone else uses. And
well,
there's a trick of making the.
We have an article at What Really Happened on how to make nano silver because we make our own here, and we really work to refine the process. And I hate to cut you off, but we are running out of time, and we got a lot of news and other phone calls that we need to get to. So, Mateus,
can you just answer me a different question?
Just real quick.
How do I test pH properly?
Say again?
How do I test pH properly? You said something about a titration or something.
Titration. Well,
how do I do that?
pH
test my pH?
pH isn't a factor in the making of nano silver.
No, it's a separate topic. It was my last question.
Well, you just go to Wikipedia and look up titration.
Titration. Okay, thanks, Michael. Have a great day.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch over to Jesse in Ohio. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. How you doing? I was just reading. They're saying Trump's going to make a big announcement on the 20th, right before the inauguration, and there's plenty of speculation that announcement's going to be that he's become gender fluid and will assume the office of the presidency as a woman just to make Hillary's head explode.
I would pay good money to see that.
I would too, actually. All right, Mike, I just had to throw that in there. You have a good day.
All right, thanks an awful lot. Okay, we're going to let you go there. That actually was funny. I would actually pay money to see that. Okay, now then. In terms of the immigration issue, during Obama's term in office, deportations dropped 73%. We've been seeing it all along. Obama's sending out the message, don't kick them out, we need them to vote for Hillary. The number of deportations going on in this country right now has hit a 43-year annual low at a time when the illegal immigrant and refugee problems are skyrocketing completely out of control. Now, Angela Merkel probably needs to rethink her decision to run for another term as Chancellor of Germany. Apparently, she was over in Brussels getting some kind of an honorary award. You know, politicians love to decorate themselves with gold and ribbon and brass and all this other thing because they think it fools you into thinking that they're important and trustworthy. And she was met with major protests in the streets saying, Merkel must go, Merkel must go, Merkel must go. And the issue were both the increasing social and economic costs of the refugee program and all the recent terror attacks tied to this open borders policy. Now, as you know, Donald Trump campaigned on and came into office talking about building a wall along our border with Mexico and getting Mexico to pay for it. And Mexico was saying, no, we're not going to do that. And we've all been joking about we don't need to build a wall, just put crocodiles in the Rio Grande. Talk about getting the pumpkin chunkers to replace the ICE and just fling these people back over the border. But apparently Mexico has now blinked, and they've told Trump that, yes, they're ready to discuss the wall and how it's going to be built and how it's going to be paid for. There's going to be no shortage of building material, of course, because when Trump won the election, 60 million Democrats all crapped a brick. Now, we've been talking about hate crime hoaxes, and apparently in the wake of this horrible video that came out of Chicago of these 4 black people kidnapping, imprisoning, torturing a mentally impaired white guy, certainly made this whole we're all victims of you white supremacists argument ring rather hollow. So down at Arundel High School, there was apparently some stuff going on about white supremacist Twitter threats, and even a poster. The KKK is coming to town. We're going to start attacking all your people. Police have finally arrested a 14-year-old black student for staging this hoax. Turning to the world of computers, apparently Lloyd's Banking Group's online and mobile app services are still having serious difficulty, and Lloyd's customers are getting very angry about this, and they're not sure whether it is poor hardware, poor software. I'm sure they're going to blame it on Russia hacking, Or it could be that Lloyd's Bank is dealing with cash flow issues. And we have seen banks before that get into a very restrictive cash position. They'll shut down their ATMs, and then they'll say, oh, we were being hacked. We had to do it for the safety of our customers, which is nonsense. And Lloyd's is basically out there with a non-explanation explanation, experiencing intermittent issues. We're still investigating. I don't want to speculate, blah, 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 blah. But I would be I'd be taking a really good look at their current cash position here. Now, campaign group over in Great Britain, Campaign Group Liberty, is requesting a High Court judicial review of the wide-ranging spying powers in the new Investigatory Powers Act, the spying charter, the snooping charter. And basically, it's kind of ironic that this law saying that the government can spy on absolutely everything the British people are doing came from the same country which gave us the Magna Carta. And it's another indication that all of these oligarchical established governments around the world are now absolutely terrified of their own people. The issue here, they're not spying on criminals. They're not spying on terrorists. The terrorists and criminals are getting away with as much as they did before, like the guy in Fort Lauderdale. They claimed that he was on their radar. He still got off that plane and killed a bunch of people. They're spending vast sums of money to watch you because they're afraid of you. They're afraid you're waking up. They're afraid that you're not believing the lies and doing as you're told any longer. They're afraid that you're waking up and realizing that we are not, in fact, the greatest nation on earth. We are not, in fact, a free nation, that the Bill of Rights has been eviscerated when you weren't looking. And the government is terrified they're losing control of you. Now, back in early 2013, when all of this spying first started coming on out, James Clapper got up before Congress and said that he was completely unaware of any mass spying by the NSA against ordinary American people. And now they're trying to say, well, how could you say that? We know now because of Edward Snowden, this stuff's been going on all the way back to the Echelon program of the 1980s. So the latest explanation is he simply forgot it was out there. It just slipped his mind that the NSA was spying on every single American citizen. So technically it wasn't a lie, it was just poor recollection, which has become a chronic disease in Washington, D.C. Maybe it's the poor quality water, the lead in the pipes, but it's amazing how all these politicians, when they get called before Congress, they're suffering massive memory loss. You know what? Somebody needs to start a memory improvement course in Washington, D.C. We'll train your memory so you remember things better. And remember, the address to sign up to our memory improvement course is, I'll get back to you on that one. Now, proving that governments left on their own are capable of a tremendous amount of lunacy, the European Parliament is actually proposing granting the legal status of electronic person to robots. You wait. The next step is the robots are going to be given the right to vote. I'm sorry. Legal status as an electronic person to a robot? Robots, at least at this time, are not sentient, self-aware, self-directing creatures. They're complex tools, and that's it. And I think we need to keep them in that place. Now, when we cross that line to where our creations have awareness and sentience, then we're going to face some tough philosophical choices, which is a big part of what was behind the storyline for Westworld, which is one of the reasons I just absolutely love that show. But this sounds like something that the European Parliament is doing, and of course they don't really have any power anyway, the European Union Commission does. This is something to get headlines or to brag about, yes, we granted legal status of electronic person to a robot. Okay. What does that actually change in our society? Is it now going to be a crime to abuse a robot? That's a little bit out there. All right, we're coming up on the end of the show here. Let's talk about human-caused global warming. Rivers and bays are freezing all over Europe. Istanbul is paralyzed. Record snow hits Greece again. Refugees are dying. Greece doesn't get a lot of snow normally. They're getting a lot now. Severe weather is sweeping across Great Britain. Large areas already hit by heavy snow. Freezing cold in the north. Narnaul, India, recorded a -0.5 degree Celsius. Very unusual for that part of the world. And, of course, the problem of all these refugees freezing to death across Europe is being seized on by pro-refugee, pro-immigration groups saying, it's a failure, you're not taking care of these people, and it's a humanitarian crisis and you've got to do something, you're just leaving all these people to freeze to death. Oddly enough, this was in the UK Independent, the very same newspaper that back in 2000 declared snowfalls were a thing of the past. I love the little bit of historical irony there. But the issue isn't humanitarianism or the care organizations. As reported out of the Express, the problem is the refugees are refusing to go to warming centers and hotels because of fears they'll be arrested and deported. And so they're choosing to stay in their tents and risk freezing to death, which is a very, very painful way to go. So what's going on here? I mean, the corporate media is still out there pushing global warming, the polar bears are dying. And we're seeing a record snow, record winter yet again. Ever since the UK Independent in 2000 said snowfalls are a thing of the past, record-setting winter after record-setting winter after record-setting winter after record-setting winter. The Old Farmer's Almanac called it on this one. And the corporate media got it wrong. NASA got it wrong. NOAA got it wrong because they're fudging the data to push an agenda. Now, as I mentioned before, one of the issues is that we've only been able to study the sun scientifically for about 100 years. And only about 20 in areas of light that are outside the visible spectrum. And we're only just now seeing some things going on. Right now, NASA released an image showing there is a very large hole in the solar corona, which is going to allow solar wind particles to gush toward Earth, triggering all kinds of aurora. The sun is going through changes. A new Maunder minimum, a new little ice age. We'll be right back. And aloha America, welcome back to the show here. And as you know, Donald Trump ignited the vaccine controversy all over again by appointing Robert Kennedy Jr. To head a commission on vaccine safety and scientific integrity. And the reaction from the big pharmaceutical corporations has been immediate. They're calling on all their media assets to denounce this. The story just came out of the Globe and Mail, how Trump is just being delusional here to think that there's any danger in vaccines. Big Pharma is afraid that Trump is about to take away their cash cow. And the fact of the matter is that there is evidence that these vaccines are not all safe, that they are harmful. But behind it all is a very simple issue. It should be up to the people to decide for themselves. Is this vaccine safe? Is it something that's really going to benefit me or my child? That's the real issue. Now, if the vaccine companies want to put out vaccines with chemicals in them that cause problems like thimerosal, and a gullible public buys them, that's one thing. But it's quite another when a rising dictatorship, in order to get tax revenues, a piece of the action, orders you to stick your kid with a needle that could cause them harm. That's something else very, very different. Now, over at the CDC, scientist Dr. William Thompson has confirmed Trump's suspicion that there is a link between vaccines and autism. It is real. Now, remember, William Thompson was the CDC scientist who authored the CDC's report claiming there was no link. Then he blew the whistle saying that the CDC's report was a complete fraud, that they cherry-picked the data to get the result they wanted. I mean, thimerosal is based on mercury. Mercury is a known neurotoxin. Remember Alice in Wonderland, the Mad Hatter? There's actually an historical precedent for that. Because back in the time of Lewis Carroll, milliners, hatters, would use mercury to prepare hair fibers for the felting process. Exposure to the mercury would make the little scales on the hair stand up and grab tighter and bond. And that was a key part of creating the felt, which was then formed over the mold to create the hat. And hatters had a reputation after years in the business of being just borderline insane. And it was the mercury poisoning. That's where the expression mad as a hatter comes from. That's where the character of the Mad Hatter in Alice in Wonderland came from. There's a real issue there. And again, as I mentioned earlier in the show, the first documented cases of autism appeared just after the mercury-based preservative was added to vaccines. So each succeeding generation of corporate executives and presidential administrations just went along and went along. Now it's a gargantuan scandal. When it comes on out, the American people are going to realize this was a multi-generational fraud to get money. And it harmed untold millions of people. There's the music time for me to get on out of here. Remember, you Rivero's Rangers, your mission, should you choose to accept it, grab that story about Ukraine buying those old junker T-72 tanks, post it everywhere with the comment that the only possible use for those tanks is to fake a Russian invasion to launch World War III. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.